For many Texas families, it's been their last hope to find a missing loved one. A program called Namus is short for the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System. It's based in North Texas and was created to help police and families solve cases using fingerprints, DNA, dental records, and other details. In Texas alone, since 2007, this national database has helped to resolve 600 cases, but thousands remain open in the system, and many others have never been entered. KXAN investigators first told you about Namus almost 2 years ago. That's when just 6 states had passed laws requiring police and medical examiners to report all missing and unidentified person cases to this database, which is available to the public.
Since then, other states have joined the effort, but still not Texas. KXAN investigator Arzo Dos learned a new state lawmaker is determined to change that, hopefully helping more families find closure.
He was always kind of the life of the party, just really had a great personality.
David Fritz can't help but light up when he talks about his son, Joseph.
He really excelled.
He's the proud father of the Marine from Houston.
Joseph didn't always smile in pictures, but that one, he was definitely smiling after boot camp.
David says his son only served 2 years before he was injured at a base in North Carolina and honorably discharged. After that, he says personal problems led his son to depression and then opioid addiction.
One day, he decided he needed to get away, which I encouraged him as well, just to have a trip, try to clear his mind. He went to South Texas, and that was the last I'd heard of him.
That was in October of 2017. David says he knew Joseph had gone to Laredo, but after days of not hearing from him, worry set in. He filed a missing persons report with Houston police, and later in Laredo and even Mexico, and then headed south looking for Joseph himself. What he found was his car at the border, but no signs of his son.
It was so hard, difficult at times, asking people on the street, with a photo of your son, if they'd seen him.
He did that for almost 2 years. Finally, the call he dreaded came from Houston police telling him Joseph's body had been recovered in the Rio Grande River in Laredo. What was odd was it was found 2 days after the first missing persons report was filed.
No one's sharing information, or there is one spot, but it's voluntary, which doesn't do any good.
KXAN uncovered that Texas law enforcement and medical examiners aren't always entering information in every case to the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, or NAMUS, based in Fort Worth. David believes if the medical examiner in Laredo had entered details about Joseph's remains in the database, he would have found him because he was checking regularly.
If Joseph's brown hair, brown eyes, and his weight had been entered, I wouldn't have been tortured for 2 years,
David says Joseph's DNA was required to be entered into another database maintained by the FBI called CODIS. It was only after his family had put Joseph's information into NAMUS and then submitted their own DNA to cross-reference years later that there was actually a match with his remains.
If everybody was required to enter information in NAMUS, then everybody would use it.
10 states have now passed laws requiring law enforcement to report case details to NAMUS for all missing and unidentified persons cases. Even though the system is housed in Fort Worth, Texas doesn't have that reporting requirement.
I just assumed it was something that already took place.
Lacey Hall found that out when she knocked on David's door last year.
Hello?
She was running to become his state representative and block walking his neighborhood before the November election.
And I brought up NAMUS and what I've gone through.
I just thought how many other people are suffering, and it's bad enough to have your loved one missing and not knowing.
She said, I think it's something I could help with.
I said, when I win, I'm going to do this. Like, this is something that we need to help Texas families have closure.
Representative Hall was sworn into office last month. Her first action, filing House Bill 1419. It will require law enforcement or medical examiners to enter information into Namus, including dental records, fingerprints, and clothing descriptions of missing persons within 30 days, and unidentified bodies no later than 60 days.
There is, zero fiscal impact to the state. This actually, in the long run, will end up saving time, money, and resources for the agencies involved by matching up the missing persons cases with the unidentified bodies.
What would it have meant for your family?
I would have immediately located Joseph's remains. We also would have been able to have a complete autopsy, before all those remains were destroyed for toxicology.
David says all they know is his son's cause of death, drowning. He was buried as John Doe in a Laredo cemetery. Last February, David was finally able to find the grave and bring him home.
It's horrible for a family to have to go through this. At least I'm one of the lucky ones that I still feel blessed in that I was able to locate Joseph.
The bill will not require previous cases to be entered into Namus, only cases moving forward. Representative Hall says that's how they can keep it at no cost. This was something State Representative Charlie Guerin told our team nearly 2 years ago he would look into because he's worked on a related system in the past.
Knowing that other states are requiring law enforcement agencies to report to Namus, do you think it's at least something Texas should explore?
If we need to be part of Namus in order to get police to submit the stuff, then we'll carry a bill and do that.
After trying to reach Representative Guerin several times, his chief of staff finally responded back telling us he's still interested in this particular issue. Why him? Well, Namus is in his district, managed by the University of North Texas Health Science Center, which also has a separate forensics lab. At this point, though, it's not even clear how long Namus will even stay in Texas. Sources tell us funding cuts have impacted services, including DNA testing. A spokesperson with the program says the current agreement with the university is up in September, but that Namus will remain an available resource for all those who rely on it. Arzo Dost, back to you.
Arzo, thank you. And as we mentioned, this is an issue we've been following for almost 2 years. After launching our investigation in Mayberry, Texas, you may remember we shared this Houston woman's story. Alice Almendarez was desperately looking for a lawmaker who would change reporting requirements when someone disappears. Even though she'd filed a missing persons report, it took 12 years to learn what happened to her father, John. His body had been found near his home just weeks after he disappeared, but it was labeled unidentified until years later when Namus got involved.
I want this to change. I want this to stop. I know what it feels like, and I don't want anyone else to feel that, especially for longer than they have to.
Alice says what's hardest is her father never got to meet his grandchildren. Last year, she welcomed a baby boy and named him after her father. Now she's working closely with Representative Hull on her bill, which, by the way, is called John and Joseph's Law, after Alice's father and David Fritz's son. We've taken a deeper dive into what it's taken to get this bill to become reality in a new episode of our Catalyst podcast. You can find a link by going to missingintexas.com right now.
Well, tonight